You ever been so angry your gums hurt? Not your head, not your chest, your gums. Like your teeth know you're about to bite someone. Hi, my name's Margaret N. Prescott, and I'm a 62-year-old widow from southern Missouri. I used to crochet hats for cats and teach Sunday school. Now I Google things like legally tormenting someone on adjoining property and do pigs scream at night? Let me tell you how I got here. When my husband Frank died, I grieved the way most women do after a long, complicated marriage. I cried in the mornings, handled the paperwork in the afternoons, and screamed into a towel most nights after Jeopardy. He was a hard man. Not cruel, not sweet, just opaque. Like loving a barn door. Big, sturdy, quiet, and splinters you if you get too close. We were married for 38 years. Never had children. Tried, but that's another story and a sad one. We lived on 12 acres just outside of Benton County, land that had been in Frank's family since the 1940s. I tended the house, helped with the books on his logging business, grew tomatoes the size of baby heads, and kept our marriage running on silent agreements. He didn't ask where I went in the afternoons. I didn't ask why he had 2 phones. I thought that was peace. Until he died. Coronary embolism. Dropped like a stone on the garage floor while fiddling with the leaf blower. I found him with oil on his boots and a look of surprise that almost made me laugh. I planned the funeral in 3 days. I wore blue instead of black. He always said black washed me out. I buried him next to his parents and even paid extra to have "beloved husband" engraved, like a damn idiot. And then, 2 months later, I got the will. Frank left me most of the estate. That part one expected. The house, the vehicles, the accounts, his rifles, even the silver coin collection he kept locked in a safe behind the whiskey rack. But tucked neatly in the second page, like a parasite in a pretty apple, was this clause. To Sandra Lee Holmes of 218 Quiet Pine Road, I leave the western 2 acres of the Prescott land, currently undeveloped, as a gift of enduring appreciation. 218 Quiet Pine. I stared at it for a full minute before it registered. That's my neighbor's house. My neighbor of 30 goddamn years. Sandra Lee, with her fake French braids and sun visor and lip gloss that sparkled like car wax. Sandra Lee, who always had too much to say about my hydrangeas. Who'd bring over sugar-free muffins every Easter with a smirk and ask, "You still doing Weight Watchers, Marge?" Sandra Lee, who waved at my husband just a little too long. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I laughed so hard I pulled a muscle in my side. Then I drank 3 wine coolers, cursed the legal system, and spent the rest of the night on the porch in my bathrobe, trying to will a lightning bolt into her living room. Let me be real clear. The western 2 acres may not look like much. Some brush, a couple dogwoods, a busted fence line. But it's mine. It's the part of the land that touches her property. And Frank, dead, cheating bastard, willed it to her without telling me. And she knew. Oh, she knew. The day I found out, she popped by like it was any other Thursday. I was out front weeding the flower beds, sweat soaking the back of my neck, and she just leaned over the picket fence and chirped. He always was generous. I almost stabbed her with the garden trowel. Instead, I smiled. Like a psychopath. And I said, "Enjoy your slice of heaven, Sandra. Just don't forget, everything else you see, still mine." That was the last time we spoke civilly. The land transfer was legal. Bulletproof. His will was notarized and everything. I consulted 2 lawyers. Both shrugged and said some variation of "it sucks, but you've got no case unless you can prove coercion, fraud, or dementia." Dementia? Please. Frank remembered every fishing lure he ever owned, but forgot to mention he was dry humping the neighbor in my tomato patch. Real convenient. I went back to the house and sat in the middle of our kitchen floor. I looked at the tiles we laid ourselves in '89. The floral curtains I sewed by hand. The cuckoo clock from Branson he always pretended to hate but secretly wound every morning. And I made a decision. I was going to make Sandra Lee regret ever unzipping her Velcro shorts for my husband. But not loudly. Not with lawsuits or screaming matches or torching her house. No. This would be quiet. Long, psychological. Biblical. I started by playing Conway Twitty on a loop, loud enough to shake the fence. Then, at night, I switched to recordings of coyotes. Just low enough to be annoying, not actionable. I began tossing garden scraps, rotten cucumbers, pungent onions, over the border fence. Compost, I'd say, if anyone asked. Then came the dead squirrels. Not killed by me, roadkill. I just relocated them, tastefully, onto her side of the tree line. Sometimes with little flags. She never brought it up, but I caught her once hosing down the lawn with tears in her eyes. That was only the beginning. Because something dark had taken root in me. And it was growing. I never thought I'd become the kind of woman who Googled how long a dead possum smells, but here we are. Sandra Lee's western border is now my battlefield. Look, if you've never had a 30-year neighbor smile in your face while screwing your husband on the very land your name is still on the deed to, don't judge my methods. Because it wasn't just the affair. It wasn't just the land. It was the fact that she thought she won. She strutted around in her pastel capris and rhinestone sandals like the goddamn Duchess of Backyards. A woman whose idea of hardship was a flat Diet Coke. But let's back up. After Phase 1 of Operation Slow Burn, aka Dead Squirrels and Conway Twitty, I noticed Sandra started walking the perimeter of her new land, like a colonial settler claiming Oregon. Sometimes I'd catch her out there with a tape measure and a little sketch pad. Sometimes with her phone, taking pictures like she was about to list it on Zillow. So I started planting invasive species. Kudzu vines? Check. Japanese knotweed? Double check. I scattered seeds at the border, watered them at night, and waited. Within 3 weeks, the green curtain had begun to creep, a living wall of spite. Next came the accidental spill. I cleaned out the shed one Saturday and goops dropped a gallon of fish emulsion right on the fence line. The smell was biblical. If Satan farted into a crockpot, that's what it smelled like. Her back deck was uninhabitable for 2 weeks. She started burning citronella candles during the day. I almost felt bad. Almost. And still, she said nothing. No lawsuits. No threats. Just tight smiles and tighter ponytails. The way only someone truly confident they'll win in the end can smile. So I escalated. That fall, I paid a teenage boy from down the road $20 to help me build a chicken wire enclosure. "What are you putting in here, Ms. Prescott?" he asked, wiping his forehead. "Therapy," I said. He didn't get it. What I was building was a future pig pen. But I wasn't ready to unleash the hogs just yet. First, I needed Sandra to get comfortable. Complacent. Let her think I'd simmered down. So for 2 months, I did nothing. No possums. No blaring country music. I even trimmed back the vines and replanted some native wildflowers. I waved to her across the fence. She waved back, cautiously, like a woman who smells poison in her lemonade but drinks anyway. Meanwhile, I made friends at the county zoning office. You know what's legal on rural property in Missouri zoned for agriculture? Pigs. You know what's not protected by local nuisance laws? Pig stench. It turns out that if your land is zoned properly, and your animals are contained, and you're not violating any health codes, there is nothing your neighbor can do when your pigs scream like they're being murdered at 3 a.m. because they saw a frog. This plan wasn't born out of rage. It was born out of research. I filed a notice of agricultural use expansion and started calling breeders. I spent my evenings watching YouTube videos titled things like Beginner's Guide to Backyard Hogs and What No One Tells You About Pig Pee. Spoiler, it's more like soup. Sandra didn't know what was coming, but her trees were about to shake. In the meantime, I gave her one last mercy. I called a truce meeting. I invited her to coffee. I made brownies. Sat across the kitchen table from her like we hadn't both mentally envisioned each other's funerals. "I want to move on," I said. "Frank's gone. What's done is done. Maybe we can both make peace." She smiled. Not a sincere one. A pageant smile. Well, she said, stirring her tea like it was full of secrets. I hope so. I'd hate to see all this tension affect property values. That's when I knew she deserved everything I had planned. Not for the sex. Not even for the land. But for being smug about it. Smug is the worst sin of all. The next day, I picked up 3 hoglets from a breeder out of Eldon. Named them Mabel, Squeaky, and Justice. They rode home in the back of my Subaru like war criminals. They grew fast. By Thanksgiving, they were the size of Labradors and could scream like a crime scene. I gave them a diet of cabbage, old milk, and joyless bred heels. The pen sat right at the edge of her gifted land. And I made sure they were loudest at night. Because revenge doesn't have to be quick. It just has to be undeniable. So, there's a very specific sound pigs make when you put cold water in their trough on a hot Missouri morning. It's something between a shriek and a kazoo played by the damned. A sound so layered and unnatural that I'm fairly certain it's what plays in the background when people see their life flash before their eyes. Sandra heard it every morning at 6:15 a.m. sharp. See, Mabel, Squeaky, and Justice. Yes, I kept that name, poetic symmetry, weren't just pigs. They were my little angels of retribution. They didn't need to try to be disruptive. They just were. And the laws of Benton County were on their side. Their pen sat 3 feet from the property line, directly adjacent to Sandra's precious meditation deck, which she once bragged was blessed by a traveling Reiki specialist. Well, I hope the Reiki ghost enjoyed listening to pigs fart through the mist while Sandra drank her detox smoothies. And here's the best part. Every single squeal, grunt, and slop slap was 100% legal. My land was zoned for AG. I'd pulled the permits, followed the rules, had the veterinary paperwork framed and laminated. I wasn't just tormenting her, I was regulating. But things escalated in a way I didn't expect. Because this is a small town. And in small towns, pettiness is a contact sport. One day, I stopped by the diner to grab a breakfast sandwich. As I walked in, everything got real quiet, like Western movie saloon quiet. I figured maybe someone finally found out about the squirrel composting. Instead, Diane, who runs the local Facebook gossip group Bell Creek Banter, said, "Margaret, is it true you got pigs?" I nodded. 3 of them. She grinned. "On the west side of your land?" I took a bite of biscuit. "Yup. Right next to Sandra Lee's little wine-tasting porch?" Chewed. Swallowed. "Sure is." The diner erupted in applause. I swear on my mother's lemon pie. Full-on clapping. A man I didn't even know paid for my coffee. One woman whispered, that which always stole my mail. Turns out, Sandra had alienated half the damn town over the years. Judgy little remarks. Petty HOA complaints. She once called the sheriff on a teenage girl for having a too colorful prom dress. So now my pigs had become local folk heroes. Justice was a meme. Literally. Someone posted a video of her rolling in mud with the caption, "When your man dies and you win the war anyway." But Sandra? Sandra was unraveling. I saw it happen in real time. First, she tried polite. Stopped by with sugar cookies, store-bought, bless her heart, and said, "Maybe there's a better spot for the pigs?" I smiled and said, "Oh honey, they love it here. And legally, this is designated swine use land." Got the county seal and everything. Then she tried passive-aggressive. Left an anonymous note in my mailbox about noise pollution and animal cruelty. I handed it to Deputy Miles with a smile and a pie. He hates her too. Then, she tried the nuclear option, Facebook drama. She posted a blurry photo of Mabel Midoink and wrote, "This is what I wake up to every morning. If anyone knows how to file a nuisance complaint, please message me." Big mistake. The comments turned on her like vultures in a Wendy's parking lot. "Pretty sure you bragged about getting that land, Sandra. Margaret's pigs are the only good thing happening in this hell town. Bet you didn't complain when you were sleeping with her husband." By the time I scrolled through the 83 comments and 47 laughing emojis, I had to go lie down and fan myself like a Victorian widow. But the best part? A young woman from Colombia DM'd me and asked if she could feature me and my revenge farm on her podcast about rural justice and land-based retaliation culture. I didn't know what that meant, but I said yes. She came down the next week with a microphone, a camera, and a lot of hair gel. Interviewed me right in front of the pig pen. "Why pigs?" she asked. I said deadpan because goats would have been too obvious. The episode blew up. Within a week, I had followers from across the country. Women from Maine to Arizona messaged me with their own stories: cheating husbands, snake neighbors, family betrayals. One woman sent me a crocheted pig with a stitched patch on it, but that read Sandra. Meanwhile, Sandra started trying to sell the land Frank left her. I know this because I called every local realtor and asked about listings with 2 acres, rural Benton, Western Treeline. She couldn't sell it. Because of me. Because no one wants to build a dream gazebo next to a pig opera. You think I'd stop there? You think I'd felt satisfied? Oh, honey, the pigs were just Act 1. Because Phase 2? It involved zoning appeals, a giant shed, a speaker system, and something called a manure sprayer. Let me start with this. I didn't plan on becoming a local legend. I just wanted Sandra Lee to suffer a little bit. Hear some squealing. Lose a few brunches to the stench of hogs and heat. But I should have known better. Because once you feed the beast of small-town revenge, it gets hungry for spectacle. Phase 2 began with a zoning loophole and a measuring tape. Now remember, Sandra inherited 2 acres. Flat. Treeless. Exposed. She never built anything on it, probably because she thought the mere idea of owning it was the win. But when I saw her standing on that barren patch of dirt, looking at blueprints like she was about to launch a vineyard, something snapped in me. So I went to the county office and did what any grieving widow with a grudge would do. I applied for an AG building permit. Not a house. Not a garage. A livestock maintenance structure. See, in Missouri, there's this very convenient little rule. If you already have livestock and your land is AG zoned, you can erect an enclosed utility shed for housing tools, feed, or even, you guessed it, manure processing equipment without public notice if it's under a certain square footage. So I filed. Then I built a shed. A big one. Olive green, metal roof, industrial-grade exhaust fans. Right up to the setback limit, legal to the inch. It looked like a Home Depot threw up on her property line. Sandra came outside the day the foundation was poured. She had a smoothie in one hand and a Kindle in the other. Stared at the construction for a full 60 seconds. Then, in her softest, fakest voice, asked, "What's that?" I didn't even look up from my clipboard. "Storage," I said. "Storage for what?" "Justice." Then I walked inside and turned up the radio. By month's end, the shed was complete and fully wired for Phase 2's masterpiece, the slurry sprayer. Now listen, I didn't invent the manure sprayer. But I invested in it. A used model off Craigslist, picked up by a cousin with a trailer and no follow-up questions. It's basically a high-pressure hose attached to a tank filled with pig waste. You want biblical? This thing could baptize a demon. Once I had it hooked up, I waited for the right moment. It came on Mother's Day. Sandra had a backyard brunch planned. I saw the signs: white folding chairs, a table runner, mimosas. She wore a dress with lemons on it and said namaste to someone over the fence. I waited until the first round of tiny champagne flutes were clinking. Then I fired the sprayer. It didn't hit her yard directly, just misted the air between us with the sweet scent of fermented pig dreams. But wind is a funny thing. By the time they got the quiche off the table, the only thing bubbling was Sandra's fury. She came over that night. Didn't knock. Just stomped across the yard in yoga pants and fury. "You need to stop," she hissed. "This is harassment." I sipped my tea. "No, Sandra. This is farming. You know, on the land my husband left me." Her nostrils flared. "You're disgusting." I stood up, slow and calm. "UF*******, Ed my husband." She slapped me. Dead quiet. Then I laughed. Full-throated, ugly, triumphant laughter. I hadn't laughed like that since Frank accidentally deleted my whole DVR queue in 2015. You just hit a widow, I said. On her own property. With a shed full of legal documentation. I pointed to the security camera blinking quietly from the porch. Her face crumbled. I swear she aged 5 years in 5 seconds. She ran. And I? I went inside, poured a glass of boxed wine, and raised it to the sky like Mufasa. Because I had crossed the Rubicon. And I wasn't done. The next week, I started selling Justice the Pig t-shirts online. All proceeds went to local animal shelters. We raised $2,700 in 3 days. Someone spray-painted Hog Queen of Benton on the side of my mailbox. And every time Sandra tried to file a complaint, she ran into the same answer. She's not doing anything illegal. Because I had spent months building a fortress of legality around my revenge. I didn't just fight dirty. I fought by the book. And the book had my fingerprints on every page. I've learned something in the saga, y'all. There's nothing more terrifying to corrupt people than a woman with a clipboard, legal footing, and absolutely nothing left to lose. By the time summer hit, Sandra was cornered. The pigs were thriving. The shed stood like a fortress. My merch store had expanded to include mugs, tote bags, and, by popular demand, yard signs that read, "This property is monitored by Justice the Pig." I had supporters from 5 counties over. But Sandra? Oh, Sandra got desperate. First, she filed a formal nuisance complaint with the Benton County Zoning Board. Claimed excessive odor, auditory harassment, and targeted waste management intimidation. Yes, really. She wrote that. I received my notice in the mail on a Wednesday. It was printed on official cardstock, probably to make it feel scarier. I laughed so hard I choked on a wheat thin. See, what Sandra didn't know was that 2 months earlier, I'd become a certified agriculture education advocate through an online course with a guy named Rick from Iowa who believes zoning laws are God's Sudoku. Rick had helped me file every form correctly. We'd even double-checked Section 7.3c of the Missouri Agricultural Protection Ordinance, which states, and I quote, "No agricultural landowner shall be deemed in violation of nuisance provisions so long as reasonable livestock operations are maintained in compliance with public health codes." I framed it. So when the county board meeting came, I didn't just show up, I rolled in with receipts. The room was packed. Standing room only. Word had spread through town like wildfire. People brought popcorn. Someone brought a pig on a leash. It wasn't mine, but spiritually? Absolutely mine. The board sat up front, 5 people in folding chairs, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Sandra stood in a lemon print blouse, clutching a binder, and looking like she'd aged through a presidency. She began, "This woman, this widow, has been targeting me for months. She's using pigs to harass me. She installed an industrial sprayer. She plays country music at indecent volumes. And she's profiting from it." I stood when they asked for a response. "I followed every law," I said calmly. "I registered my pigs, maintained my pens, and acquired the proper permits. I have never trespassed, threatened, or broken any zoning code. If Ms. Holmes feels discomfort, perhaps she should reflect on the origin of her property, given to her in my husband's will, without my knowledge or consent." Gasps. Actual gasps. I produced copies of the zoning forms, timestamps, permits, and yes, even photos of Justice the Pig wearing a flower crown. "This isn't about livestock," I said. "It's about consequences. And the fact that some people, when faced with the stink of their own choices, blame the pigs instead of their past." The board deliberated for 10 minutes. Then they voted, unanimous in my favor. Sandra screamed, actually screamed, like a toddler denied an iPad. "This is insane," she shouted. "She's tormenting me." The board chair, a woman named Marcy who once bought jam from my church fundraiser, leaned forward and said, "Ma'am, she legally outmaneuvered you." "Maybe, Move. And that was the moment I won. Not just the war, but every war I didn't know I was fighting. Because now it wasn't just revenge. It was vindication. Sandra left the meeting red-faced and shaking. Someone handed her a flyer for local apartments. I think she cried in the parking lot. I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered her smirking at me across the fence. I remembered the clause in the will, the fake muffins, the way she had the audacity to make me feel small in my own grief. So instead, I walked outside, patted Justice on the head, she'd waited patiently in the Subaru, and drove home in peace. That night, my porch light flicked on and off. A gift had been left, a bottle of wine and a handwritten note. Margaret, you are our justice. Love, the girls at Bell Creek banter. I sat outside and drank straight from the bottle. Because at 62, with a pig empire and a county board behind me, I was finally free. Sandra Lee moved out 3 weeks after the board meeting. No big announcement. No for sale sign. Just a silent, sweaty exit with 2 college boys hauling out her patio furniture while she stood on the curb in oversized sunglasses and defeat. She didn't even say goodbye. Which was fine. I said mine the night before, when I stood at the edge of the fence line with a flashlight and whispered, "And stay gone." She left the land behind, of course. Couldn't sell it, word had spread too far. No one wanted 2 acres of adjacent hog trauma. The joke online was, Sandra's land, perfect for meditation if you're deaf and dead inside. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because revenge isn't a moment. It's a memorial. And I wanted to leave something behind. So I turned her old 2 acres into a community pig sanctuary. Funded by donations. Staffed by teen volunteers. Local kids painted murals on the fence, Justice wearing a crown, Mabel in sunglasses, Squeaky in a cape. We built a small pavilion with picnic tables. Seniors came out on Wednesdays to feed the pigs. I printed shirts that said, "We believe in squealing justice." When Sandra's property taxes came due, I found out she hadn't transferred the land title to anyone. Her name was still on it. She was still financially responsible for a sanctuary she abandoned. She tried to sue me for emotional distress. My lawyer, Karen, a 78-year-old retired civil litigator with no patience for foolishness, responded with a 1-line email. Your client's emotional distress is not a zoning issue, nor is it our F******ing problem. Sandra disappeared after that. Moved to Kansas City, I heard. Lives in a condo above a frozen yogurt place. I hope every time she eats strawberry swirl, she hears Justice squeal in her dreams. As for me, I'm not just Margaret N. Prescott, widow of Frank the Disloyal. I'm Mayor Margaret now. Yes, that happened. They wrote me in during the special election. Dana from the Bell Creek Times led the charge. Said I represented accountability, charm, and livestock-based leadership. I didn't campaign. I didn't need to. I just stood up at the town hall, tapped the mic, and said, I already cleaned out the worst part of this town once. I can do it again. Unanimous win. And every Thursday at 10 a.m., I walk through the pig sanctuary with a clipboard and a cup of black coffee. Local kids run around. Tourists come to take selfies with the mural. The pigs grunt in harmony like they know they're part of something bigger. Sometimes I sit on the bench facing the empty lot next door. The 2-acre Sandra never got to love. And I whisper, this land remembers who it belonged to, and who tried to steal it, and who made it sing again. Because in the end, revenge isn't about making them feel your pain. It's about building something louder than their lies.